from the Mercy One studio.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio and Making It Personal is provided by Sarah Vocations Ministry. Learn more at joinserra.org.
Making It Personal with Bishop William Joensen on Iowa Catholic Radio and iowacatholicradio.com.
Welcome to Making It Personal with Bishop Joensen. I'm Kelly Mesher-Collins with the Diocese of Des Moines, and today's show we're visiting with Father Daniel Mo, the chaplain for the U.S. 7th Fleet in Yokosuka, Japan. But before we get to today's interview, let's find out what's on the Bishop's mind.
Good morning, Kelly. Wow,
morning.
Again, another action-packed week.
Yes.
The men's conference, I think, really charged the several hundred men who were present for that. Tim Jameson really gave us a powerful spiritual message.
Yes, he did.
So much so that some of our priests are saying we should invite him to our clergy gathering, and I think that sows a good seed for me as well. And, of course, nobody can imitate Gary Dolphin, voice of the Hawkeyes, but what a great Catholic Christian witness interspersed with, a lot of sports talk. So, it's serving it up to the men as well. And, of course, Dowling Catholic High School baccalaureate mass last night. It's finally had a chance to have a mass with many of the school community there, and their graduation tonight as well. We keep rolling through with the confirmation season at Elizabeth Seton on Sunday, and gathering our international sisters as well on Sunday, kind of offering them, we were not able to get together on the Feast of the Presentation. So just really celebrating on Memorial Day weekend and remembering our fallen men and women in the armed forces and holding them up as they've defended our country through so many years of this country's history as well. And that kind of gives us the chance to bring our guest in here right away as we anticipate Memorial Day weekend. A friend of mine and someone who goes back, even back to seminary days, Father Daniel Mode. So welcome. It's good to have you in the Midwest here.
Great joy to be back in the Midwest and be back to Iowa, Bishop. I can't believe in 5 years this is my 5th visit to Iowa and my 2nd visit to Des Moines. I truly feel like an Iowan at heart.
Well, I think we can petition Governor Kim Reynolds to get, give you honorary status.
Well, I've actually met her in the governor's mansion, so I'm almost there.
You're ahead of us as well, I don't think I would have any luck, though, in speaking either to Archbishop Berlioz, the Archbishop of the Military Services, or Bishop Burbridge of the Diocese of Arlington, Virginia, of which you are incarnated and ordained 29 years a week or two ago. So congratulations on faithful priestly ministry. But your ministry has become really a special dedication to our men and women in uniform as a Navy chaplain as well. How did that kind of evolve?
Well, I grew up in a Navy family. My dad was a Navy ship driver, as we say, a SWO. And so I literally grew up all over the world. I've always had an ID card in my hand. So when people say, how long have you been in the Navy? I say 55 years. That's how old I am. I've lived all over the world. I've never lived longer than 4 years in one place. I've lived in places like Adak, Alaska, and South Korea, and Hawaii. I went to 3 different high schools in 2 different countries. And the first high school was a Catholic school. The second one was a DOD school in Korea. And the third one was a public school in Springfield, Virginia, which is how I entered the Diocese of Arlington, of all places. So I really come from a Navy brat family. My dad commissioned my brother, and my brother was a submarine officer for his whole career, and my brother commissioned me. So, again, we kind of have apostolic succession within the military framework. So it's very natural for me to serve as a military chaplain.
You have to be commissioned by 3 Navy officers at the same time, like bishops have to have 3 to be...
Right, but there has to be the principal celebrant and consecrator. So I had thought to possibly join the military, but it really wasn't until the Josephinum, my college...
The Pontifical College Josephinum, Columbus, Ohio.
My senior year there, a Navy recruiter priest came and mentioned it, and I had not thought about it, even though I grew up in the Navy and was at Navy chapels all my life. And so I asked my dad, and he said, well, why don't you ask the bishop? And the bishop said, sure, I'll let you think about it and go on this program where they take seminarians and kind of do an investigation to see if this is what you'd like to do. Ultimately, I would spend 13 years in the diocese as a associate pastor, vice principal of a high school, and then a pastor of a parish in Alexandria, Virginia. But all during that time, I was also a reservist. But then came 2005 and Afghanistan. and I was called up involuntarily to serve for 2 years in Afghanistan, and then there's kind of the rest of the story after that.
Well, that sets us up for our listeners in Spirit Catholic Radio in Omaha and then Nebraska and all the whole region. So we'll be right back. Kelly, I'm stealing your thunder here.
Sorry. We're going to take a quick break and listen to Get Personal with Bishop Joensen.
Sorry.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio and John Leonetti in the Morning provided by Bell Construction.
Bell Construction is a roofing company. They specialize in residential re-roofs like commercial jobs and have the experience to meet all of your roofing needs with personal service. With Bell Construction, the owner will come to your home or place of business in person to inspect and ensure the quality of work that you deserve. They pride themselves in working with you on a personal basis and making sure you are satisfied. Bell Construction, 515-963-4494. Bell Construction.
Thank you, Big Red Q Quick Print, for underwriting the sports report. Family owned and operated since 1980, Big Red Q Quick Print is a full-service print shop ready to help you with all your printing needs with speed and accuracy. Forms, manuals, brochures, letterhead, envelopes, business cards, custom invitations, design, and bindery. Big Red Q Quick Print, located across from Merle Hay Mall. Online at bigredq-desmoines.com. Big Red Q Quick Print. We make printing easy.
Welcome back. You're listening to Making It Personal with Bishop Joensen. On today's show, we're visiting with Father Daniel Moe, the chaplain for the U.S. 7th Fleet in Yokosuka, Japan.
So you mentioned involuntarily called up for Afghanistan, but that was part of the commitment as far as being a reservist, not only on your part, but your bishop at the time, Bishop Laverty. Is that correct?
That is correct. So obviously, during those years of the beginning of the war in Afghanistan and Iraq, they were asking for volunteers. And I was a pastor of a very big parish, 6,000 souls in Alexandria, Virginia. But I always knew that you could be called involuntarily. And I even told the bishop that I would have to resign my commission soon. Otherwise, the risk could be that I could be called up. And he said, no, let's let the Holy Spirit decide this. And it was on Holy Week, 2005, that I got the message that I'll be called up. And within 2 months, I was in Afghanistan and relinquished my parish and then served. So I went literally from being the pastor of grade school and 6,000 souls and 3 other priests to being a lieutenant with the Marines in the dust of Afghanistan, going from one forward operating base to the next. And the 22 months that I served in Afghanistan, I served mostly with the Army units. Even though I was a Navy chaplain serving the Marines, the Army had the biggest footprint over there. So the 173rd Army Rangers and the 10th Mountain Division. Ultimately, over those 22 months, I would offer 586 masses to 16,121 service members, going on 232 missions to 48 different forward operating bases. So that's on average every 2.5 days, getting in a helicopter or a plane or a Humvee, getting from point A to point B to be with the service members where they're needed most. At the time I was there were only 6 Catholic priests, military Catholic priests, to serve all of Afghanistan. Which is enormous. It's the size of the state of Texas. Mm-hmm. And you can imagine how dangerous it is to get from point A to point B. So,
talk about an itinerant priest and preacher and that, and in harm's way, obviously, many times. So I
often say I'm not a chaplain. I am a chaplain, a Navy chaplain, but I often describe myself, especially to people of religion and my brother priest, that I'm really a missionary. Because a missionary goes to where they're needed, but not necessarily wanted, and they're to stay until they're wanted, but not necessarily needed. And that's kind of the missionary life of a military chaplain. You're constantly being called to places that you don't know, where they don't know you, and all of a sudden you fill their need that they didn't realize they had. And then they don't want to let you go, but there's another need somewhere else. So you're always on the go. You're wearing their clothes, you're talking their language, you're living in their world, whether that's a hut, a tent, a side of a mountain, a ship. So it's quite an adventure for sure. And after those 2 years, I was still a reservist.
No dust gathers on your boots.
No. After those 2 years, the bishop realized what an amazing, powerful ministry this was, and the great need, obviously, for Catholic priests, that he let me go full-time. So since 2007, I've been an active duty Navy chaplain and have served all over the world. So my first assignment was on an aircraft carrier, the USS Truman, and deployed back to the Middle East. As a matter of fact, I would spend 3 Christmases in a row in the Middle East, 2 in Afghanistan and 1 in the United Arab Emirates deployed.
So really, no place to lay your head, in a stable way, and I'm getting a sense, if you will, of kind of military ecumenism among the branches of the service that you were reaching out to, and obviously young men and not so young men and women. You're serving them as they're away from their home and loved ones as well, and so. And so this identity of chaplain and military officer as well, those titles, you think they go together well, your military rank and as priest or father, spiritual father to those you serve? How do you kind of make peace with that in your own mind?
Well, it is hard. We always call it the 2 sides of the collar. On one side of your collar, you wear your rank, and I happen to be an 06, a captain in the Navy, which is equivalent to a colonel in the Army or the Marine Corps or the Air Force. And on the other side, I wear a cross. And do those clash? Well, I hope they don't. I often think about it like being a pastor of a parish. You kind of wear 2 sides, or being a bishop of a diocese. You're as much of a priest as you've always been, so you're wearing your cross on your left-hand side, but now you have an ownership and of administration and a weight of responsibility that goes on your right hand, and that's your rank, whether that's pastor, associate pastor, principal, hospital chaplain, bishop, and that can weigh on you. And so I think even though the military, it's a little bit more dramatic in that sense, but we all have to do it as ministers to balance that equation of the pastoral side of which we long for with the administrative side of which we're called to as well.
Okay, and obviously your investment in the people under your pastoral care as a shepherd to the flock that they entrusted to you in the military archdiocese, but also interested in those who preceded you as military chaplains and the long legacy that is there. And a couple have really kind of captured your heart and your scholarship even as well. And so could you tell us a little bit, particularly you're a published author as well? Yeah.
So it was back in seminary days at Mount St. Mary's that I would go for my first formal indoctrination into the Navy at Newport, Rhode Island. That's where our chaplain school is. And it was the summer of 1989, way back then. And arriving...
89, when I was ordained a priest.
Going back, going to the schoolhouse, everything was about this priest named Father Vincent Capodanno. The chapel that we had Mass in was the Father Capodanno Chapel. The street that the Marine DI ran us on every morning was the Father Capodanno Avenue. The ship in the harbor was the USS Capodanno. We saw his Medal of Honor, front and center in the hallway. So we learned all about Father Capodanno. So he was a priest who was killed in Vietnam, 1967, September 4th. Very heroic death. A Maryknoll missionary originally. But ultimately, because of his heroics there, he received the Medal of Honor. While I was working on a master's thesis to get a master's degree in church history as well as my MDiv, my ministry degree, and I needed to work on a paper. And I decided, why not Father Capodanno? He's so famous. Chapels are built around the world to his name. Statues on Staten Island have been built to him. A ship named after him. This should be an easy 30-page paper. So I started it in the fall of '89, and it took 2.5 years of gut-wrenching research and nonstop research. It became a labor of love.
And this is really before the digital age where you could sit in a research library and call up everything electronically.
I could go
right?
on and on about those stories. I had a payphone at the end of the hall that 40 seminarians used. Didn't have flip phone.
Payphone?
Yeah.
What is this concept of a payphone?
And the whole university had one fax machine in the administration building. I didn't even own a computer. So we had 2 computers that 150 guys used. So where do you find this? So ultimately, I knew a few people, like his relatives up in New York. I went to the archives at Maryknoll, the military archives. Slowly, I built up who the people might be that I could interview and his official records to begin to write the story. But it was hard won to get to the people, especially those who served with him in Vietnam. I didn't know whether they're alive, had passed away shortly after Vietnam. But ultimately, I would interview over 100 individuals, and very powerful. I knew right away that this was not just a history story, this was a ministry, especially with the veterans that I encountered, because many of them had PTSD. Most of them had never talked about this in their life. And again, I could tell you one story after the next, but I'll tell you one story, the story of Ray Harton. So I discovered that through one person, two people would tell you, oh, you got to write to this person. So somebody mentioned this guy, Ray Harton. Again, I'm in the seminary, and I decided, because I had all these people coming to me, to send them a form for them to fill out of how they knew Father Capodanno. Send that back to me so I could get some sort of situational awareness before I started the interview process, or whether they should be interviewed. And so I sent him this form. He, like many others, he got it. It brought back a flood of memories and survivor's guilt. He took out a revolver and shot himself in the same left arm he shot himself in, that got him shot in Vietnam, and was laying there dying. His wife found him, rushed him to the VA hospital. He would recover for a year in the VA hospital with that wound. I never heard from him again. Advanced 10 years later, I get an email now. Email is now a thing. Are you the Dan Mode that was working on this thing about Father Capodanno way back when? I said, yes. He goes, well, you sent me a letter. I didn't remember. It was 10 years ago. I'm Ray Harton, and I'm finally able to tell you my story. Can I meet you? And I thought, sure. He goes, can I meet you tomorrow? And I go, is this guy in my closet? Where is he? Well, he's in Georgia, and he drove all the way through the night to come and tell me his story. And in a nutshell, his story was that he was the last person to see Father Capodanno alive. There are two unarmed men on the battlefield that day, the corpsman and Father Capodanno. And the corpsman rushed to his side after he received that bullet wound in his left shoulder, and was shot as well through the legs. His name was Corpsman Leal. And then Father Capodanno ran to both of their sides. He first ran to Corpsman Leal, who's Catholic, anointed him, and then to Ray Harton, and anointed him. Ray says that as soon as he was anointed, and Ray was Catholic, he had just received communion with him the day before. This is a Monday. The day before was a Sunday. He anointed him, and the blood that was spurting out of his left artery stopped. And there were North Vietnamese all around them. He thought they would all get bayoneted. It stopped, and immediately after that, Father Capodanno received 27 bullet holes through his back and died on top of the corpsman and Ray Harton. So he left the battlefield just kind of shell-shocked, right? And medically evac'd back. He would marry his love of his life outside of the Catholic Church, never stepped in a Catholic church again until that meeting 10 years later. So this is 2002 now. Ultimately came back to the faith, came back, his marriage is validated, and became a strong veteran's witness and to others, and would go on the road to talk about his PTSD and how the life of Father Capodanno. What an amazing
story.
That's just one of countless.
And obviously Father Capodanno, but your role too as an agent of healing and balm and, God's providence and how that brought you together. So, wow. The name of that book is, if people want to get it on Amazon.
The Grunt Padre.
The Grunt Padre. So we commend that to our listeners and Spirit Catholic Radio and Iowa Catholic Radio as well. There's so many more things. And, of course, we are fortunate to have you right here in the studio. Cardinal Dolan of New York, who interviewed you on his radio show earlier in the week. He didn't get you in person, but we got you in person here. So, and not only for Father Capodanno, but others as well, and kind of as you've traveled the world. But Iowa, that's kind of the pinnacle, really, to be able to make it to Iowa. And, certainly the legacy of Father Leahy, which our listeners may not know about. Some of our people in Northeast Iowa might know of Father Bill Berge, who was killed in Vietnam as well as an Army chaplain. But there's another priest who has really kind of been the occasion for you to really befriend Iowa and to be quite a presence here. So could you kind of tiptoe through some of those, or those touchstones of others as well, Father
Absolutely.
Leahy and obviously Father Al Schmidt.
Yes, well, Father Al Schmidt, one of 16 Navy chaplains who've been killed in combat, and a Catholic priest, and he's actually one of two of the first chaplains killed in World War II. So we don't know which one was first. It's not a competition, but it was Pearl Harbor, December 7th. Father Schmidt was on the USS Oklahoma, obviously bombed by the Japanese, and Chaplain Kirkpatrick was on the Arizona, and both were killed. We know the story of both of them, but very heroic story of Father Schmidt, how he's from St. Louis, Iowa, spent a couple years in working in the Diocese of Dubuque before he went full-time to the military in 1939. Would find himself on the USS Oklahoma. And on that morning, it was a Sunday morning, he had already offered Mass, and then the bombs hit, and he immediately went into action. The ship listed to the side, so about half was flooded, and obviously smoke and the battle damage, so bulkheads, walls were caved in, and people couldn't find their way out. He ultimately found a porthole that he could try to get people out, well, a small porthole. So he's pushing people out and trying to get people to where this exit area is. And it's not known exactly how many people he was able to get out, but it's over 10 that he was able to push out. And when it came his time to get out, it was hard for him to get out. And he saw that he was blocking others from getting out. So we went back in, and he kept on pushing people out. And that's the last people heard of him. So he died literally with over 400 of his shipmates. He would be buried in the U.S. Oklahoma for 18 months until towards the end of the war, they righted the ship, collected all the remains of all those sailors, and put them in basically a mass grave in Hawaii. And it would not,
at the Punch Bowl Cemetery.
At the Punch Bowl Cemetery.
Yeah.
And it would be years later, with the onset of DNA typing, that they were able to figure out the different remains. And in 2016, Father Schmidt's remains were found and repatriated back to Loras College, Dubuque, Iowa, and he was laid to rest at a funeral mass. And I had the privilege, I was working in the Chief of Chaplains office in the Pentagon at the time, and the Chief of Chaplains, as well as the Chief Naval Officer, so the head of the Navy, asked me to represent the Navy at that. So that was my first touch point to learn about the story of Father Schmidt and to meet the relatives.
And we'll talk about more how that brings you back to Iowa yet again.
We're going to take a quick break. You're listening to Making It Personal with Bishop Joensen.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio and Making It Personal is provided by the Sarah Vocations Ministry, including the St. Sarah Club of Des Moines and the Sarah Club of Council Bluffs. Sarah is an apostolate of the Worldwide Catholic Church dedicated to fostering and supporting priesthood and religious vocations. Sarahans strive to accomplish their mission through prayer, fellowship, and service to the bishop, priests, sisters, and all in religious formation, and in doing so to increase their own holiness. Learn more at joinsarah.org, joinserra.org. Thank you, Sarahans, for your support of Iowa Catholic Radio.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio and the Uncommon Good provided by Mercy College of Health Sciences, where you can chart your course for more.
This is Bo Bonner.
And I'm Dr. Bud Marr from the Uncommon Good.
Mercy College provides unparalleled clinical rotations, hands-on learning, accelerated education, and flexible schedules. Since 1899, Mercy College has been transforming students into healthcare professionals. Guided by Catholic values, our faculty put classroom theory into practice. Students are prepared for roles in service and leadership throughout their own careers.
Learn more at mchs.edu.
Welcome back. You're listening to Making It Personal with Bishop Joensen. We are back with Father Daniel Moe, the chaplain for the U.S. 7th Fleet in Yokosuka, Japan.
Some of our listeners on Iowa Catholic Radio might remember my interview with Steve Sloan of Dubuque, and you've become close friends with Steve, and I think this whole trajectory of Father Schmidt and bringing you together and bringing so much. So you're here again, and even Gary Dolphin, the voice of the Hawkeyes, was referring to his minor role in assisting what's happening in Dubuque on Memorial Day, that if not that day, throughout the summer, might be well worth a vacation day for families or a trip for anyone who has respect for the military.
Absolutely, yes. This Sunday I will be in Dubuque, specifically on Father Schmidt Island in the Mississippi, just right off the coast of Dubuque, Iowa, to dedicate or rededicate a memorial to, it's called the Father Schmidt Island Veterans Memorial, to Iowa veterans. And they have spent $3.2 million renovating this memorial. It's quite amazing. I have not seen it in person yet. You can go online and see it, but you can definitely come and see it after Sunday, this Sunday, when it's dedicated. So it's really a memorial to all veterans, but has a key feature of Father Aloysius Schmidt. And one of the features is a bridge that goes out into the Mississippi River with a conical sphere that you can stand into. And that conical sphere, kind of looking like a smokestack, is really the image of that porthole that he would have seen looking up. And you can just see, wow, this would be so dramatic of trying to get out of a porthole like this. So really honoring Father Schmidt and all the Iowa veterans. So I've been asked to offer the keynote address at the dedication, and it's quite a privilege. I'm going to be speaking about 7 Iowans at this address who serve the country, and I've asked for a little leniency because of my bias as a Navy chaplain and having served in the Pacific Fleet quite a bit. So I'm going to talk about that aspect in the Iowans. So the 7 are Father Aloysius Schmidt, of course, that we've already talked about. Of course, the 5 Sullivan brothers from Waterloo, Iowa. Fascinating story about how their ship was attacked, the Juno. And in preparation for that, I'm actually going to be visiting with their relatives in Waterloo on Saturday and going through their museum to kind of touch their artifacts as well. And then the 7th one is Admiral Bill Leahy, who probably nobody knows, but is arguably the most senior military officer ever in the United States. He was the very first officer given the 5-star rank. And there's only been 7 officers, whether Army or Navy, given the 5-star rank. So he's a fleet admiral. And he was the chief of naval operations before the war. Under Roosevelt, after he retired, was made the governor of Puerto Rico and then the ambassador to France. Once we entered World War II, the president called him back and made him the very first chief of staff for the military, what we call the Joint Chiefs of Staff now. So the key advisor to the president. And Roosevelt didn't make a move without him. Took him to every conference with Churchill and Stalin. Well, guess where Bill Leahy's from, this quiet, outstanding, supremely intellectual military officer, but Hampton, Iowa. And kind of an interesting side story, on D-Day, June 6, 1945, as we're doing this major launch into Europe for the first time, there was a deception campaign that Bill Leahy, this Iowan, participated in. He decided to go back to Hampton, Iowa, for a sentimental journey, and he brought all the press with him because he was, wanted to focus on Iowa. Well, so the Germans wouldn't think that we were invading that day because the head of the military was in all places the middle of the country of Iowa, in Hampton, Iowa, doing a sentimental journey. So it could have been this day. So here
there was a strategic command center in Hampton set up, right?
So just think about that. Most people have no idea of that story, that Iowa played a part in the deception campaign for the Germans to help us win the war. And Bill Leahy was a critical part of that. So a great joy to be here in Iowa once again and to be a part of the veterans.
And so privileged that you would join us, Father Daniel Mode, and thank you for enlightening us. I mistakenly ordained Father Leahy there, but the president of Boston College. So we'll have to have you back again, but God's blessing on you and your service to the troops in the Pacific Fleet and all that you do.
This has been another edition of Making It Personal with Bishop Joensen.
You can hear Making It Personal with Bishop William Joensen every week on Iowa Catholic Radio and iowacatholicradio.com.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio and Making It Personal is provided by Sarah Vocations Ministry. Learn more at joinserra.org.